to stay.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Boards, a podcast dedicated to the actions and interests of skaters beyond skateboarding. My guest today, Raphaël Zarka, started skating in the south of France where he grew up. Aside from his love for skateboarding, he developed a strong interest for art and archaeology and eventually pursued a career as a visual artist. For the last 20 years, his work has been very much revolving around skateboarding, whether through his various books or the production of skateable sculptures, among other exciting projects. I had the opportunity to meet with him in his studio in Paris late August 2022. Unfortunately, because of technical difficulties, we had to settle for a much poorer audio recording quality. But I've learned a valuable lesson, and fingers crossed this won't happen again in the future. So here's my conversation with Raphaël. I hope you'll enjoy it. So thank you very much, Raphaël, for seeing me today. Very glad that we get to do this, and especially in person. As you know, I haven't done many of these interviews in person, so it's even better to see the person in 3 dimensions rather than over a screen. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's best for me too. Mostly in this strange situation to have to speak English to a
French person. yeah. It's we're gonna make it work. So I usually start this podcast with the same question with everybody, which is, how did you find skateboarding? And can you tell me about growing up? So we just mentioned before we started recording that you grew up in the south of France, near Nîmes. So can you tell me about where you grew up and how you discovered skateboarding, maybe?
Yes, I grew up in a very small village between Nîmes and Montpellier, in southern France, like you said. And it was really remote, and I have actually no idea how I discovered skateboarding. Mm-hmm. Most probably I've seen the toy, like a plastic skateboard, and maybe my father told me about his youth in Paris and the fact that he already had a skateboard of his own. And I remember that at one point I was fed up with my bike being, punctured, like flat.
Oh yeah, like the tires would get flat.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see.
And so it would take days or weeks for my father to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I want something that gets never flat. And I asked for a skateboard.
Mm-hmm.
And my father found me like a very cheap plastic skateboard, which was very out of date or out of fashion. I'm talking about maybe 1985. I was 7 or 8. I was born in 1977. And so I got this small plastic skateboard and I started to try pushing and started to sit on it, and my friends will just push me in the back. And since I had this skateboard, some other person in the village, they found skateboards too, like maybe an older brothers, and the skate was in the garage somewhere. Mm-hmm. So there were a couple of kids, but it was really like being in the 70s. We didn't have like contemporary skateboards.
Yeah.
But we learned how to push and to go down one step, I remember that.
And so, do you remember maybe some of the first magazines or videos that you discovered? Was that a bit later?
Yeah,
or
that was much later. I was 8 around that time. And it was, I think, when I was 10 or 11, my parents broke up. And my father met someone who was living in Montpellier.
Okay.
And this person had a son too. Mm-hmm. And when I visited them in Montpellier, I realized that there was contemporary skateboard scene, like the plastic skateboard that I had was out of fashion, like I told you. So I discovered real skateboards and what they looked like, and the fact that actually you had skateboards that at the time, some of them cost 300 francs, and that was like sport shops type of skateboard. In France it was Hawaii skateboard.
Oh yeah.
And there was another brand like this, so it's the equivalent of Decathlon right now.
Yeah.
And then I discovered that there were actually even like more expensive skateboards, like the professional skateboards.
Yeah.
And that was maybe in 98, 99. And it was around that time I got my first real professional skateboard, the Gordon & Smith Sneaky Guerrero.
Oh, nice, yeah.
With a Cycloid. I took it because I was like fond of Greek mythology.
Yeah,
and I was like very happy to have a Cycloid. But the shape was awful. Like it was like completely like a carrot. Like the nose was actually like a point. It was maybe 3 centimeters long.
Okay. Wow.
And the tail was like
huge, like a spoon.
Huge, or very like a spoon. It was very like a fish. I say like a carrot, but it could have been like a fish, but a very sharp nose.
Okay.
So I got that board, and when I was on holiday, I discovered the first No Way magazine. That was the second issue with a Ray Barbie interview.
That was a French magazine, right?
That was a French magazine. Yeah. And before that, I had access maybe to B-Cross and Skate magazine. That was a French magazine that had BMX and skateboarding in the same in the same magazine. Okay. So that was the start, and that was great.
What about videos? Do you remember maybe the first time you saw like an American video, or?
The first time was just a small part. It was during something called the Nuit de la Glisse.
Oh yeah.
Nuit de la Glisse were a compilation of many extreme sports clips,
like snowboarding,
BMX, surfing, and all this. And it was the Frankie Hill part from Propaganda video. And just after that, I discovered that was a real skateboard video, and we found the shop. That was the first video my father and my mother bought me. Propaganda. And after that, retrospectively, we went to a skate and surf shop, and they had other Powell Peralta videos and Santa Cruz videos, but from the years before, like Benzis, Streets on Fire, Wheels on Fire, and all this. So I discovered Propaganda. I think Propaganda is 1990. I would say
I can't remember the years.
1990, I would say.
Probably have them in here, but yeah.
But then, like in 1990 or 1991, I discovered like the videos of 88 too. That was already like a big change. Like the nose of the skateboarding were getting larger, wider. But for us, for me and my friend, it didn't matter that we had public domain at the same time as Propaganda.
Yeah, as long as you could watch some good skate videos.
Yeah. And I remember one detail that in southern France there were no skateboard ramps, no half pipes, no skate parks at the time. At least not close to where I lived. Yeah. So as soon as there was like a half pipe session, we were like fast forward, like we hated
only street skating.
Yeah, only street skating. Like, we could only relate to the street skating. Like, their trend. Maybe some mini ramp session because they were more fun to watch to us at least.
So what about art? Tell me how art became an interest for you. Was it as well when you were growing up, or did it come later in your life as a young adult?
Yeah, so that came later. Okay. And it also came by chance. When I was a teenager, I had no interest in art, and my father was an antique dealer, so I was interested in objects and just collecting things like any young person would be. Yeah. And my mother, she was mostly in organic food and alternative therapies and stuff like this. So like nothing related to art. They never took me to any museums. Okay. But I had friends of the family who were living in the garden of the castle of the little town where I was living at the time, Sommières. And in this garden, I started digging holes with my friends, like doing archaeology, but like because we've seen Indiana Jones and this and like any kids, you're just like dreaming of finding treasures, buried treasures,
a mummy or like some.
So we didn't find any mummies, but we found a lot of catapult balls and cannonballs and stuff. Like there were many things. And I mention this because like that got a very big impact or influence of my future life in France. When you start what we call the lycée, like the high school maybe, you have to choose what major you will have. And I had no interest about skateboarding. But the lady who was asking me, "Are you sure you don't have another type of interest?" I ended up telling her, "Yes, I like archaeology. Like I like trying to find treasures, just like in Indiana Jones movies." And she said, "Oh, okay. So you like treasures and stuff. So you like archaeology. You must study art history."
Okay.
I say, okay, I have to study art history. Well, yeah, why not? But to study art history, you also have to have art classes, like painting classes and drawing classes. And I had no interest in this, but for me, like before high school, these art classes were just like leisure times.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, why not? So I ended up going in a very good high school in Nîmes, where I would never have gone if I didn't choose this major.
Right.
And that's how I started getting these classes. And I was really bad at it. I'm really bad at drawing. There's no connection between my eyes and my hands. And also I had the wrong idea about what art was about. Like, if as a child never go into a museum, it's really hard to understand the whole change of modern art. And so I was still in my head with the idea that art was about skill. It was about, you have to draw like an Italian master would do, or whatever. And I knew I was not interested in committing to that. I had a problem in learning. Like, skateboarding was maybe the only thing I was capable of learning. And so the first year in high school, like the art teacher was like completely fed up with me. And like he wanted to throw me away, but he could not do that. Okay. And then the second year of high school, there was another teacher, and suddenly there was a revolution. We started studying Dada movement, like a movement from modernism in Switzerland, France, and other part of Europe. And there was a class about an artist called Kurt Schwitters, German artist, like collagist. He's making collage, very influenced by the collages of Picasso and Braque. And suddenly that was a revolution for me, because I noticed that was a type of art that did not require any specific skill, but you needed to have a specific eye or glance on what is around you. So a guy like Kurt Schwitters, he would pick up like a paper on the street, or I don't know, a page of a book, posters that he will tear in two and organize this and make like an abstract construction. And I really loved it immediately, and it changed my perception, and suddenly art was starting to be interesting.
So you said you were interested in archaeology at first, and that's what brought you to study art in this high school. But afterwards, eventually you didn't pursue archaeology as a job, even though what you do in some ways has a link to archaeology. But at what point did you decide, okay, I'm going to go rather towards the art route than the archaeologist route?
Just after high school, I think I really enjoyed it. I had really good friends who were in my class, and these friends were also skateboarding. We were playing music together, and some of these artists, like the Dada movement or stuff, it was also very diverse. They were doing performances, they were doing photographs, they were doing and so that was a very cool idea. Like, you can do everything, and the type of life that they were living seemed extremely exciting. So it was not maybe like I didn't want to express myself, or I didn't think I have that many things to tell to the world,
to share.
To share. But I thought that was the only type of life that seemed exciting, and I wanted to try it. So after high school, I went to the university, and it's mostly when you want to become an art teacher that you do that. I didn't go to art school straight ahead. So I did 2 years in the university. And
what did you study over there? Just
art? Like art, but art in the university. It's less practical, it's more theoretical or historical. And generally speaking, you do that when you want to be an art teacher. And after 2 years of being told what I needed to do, what I needed to learn and stuff, I was completely fed up and realized I wanted to be in an art school, what we call in France the École des Beaux-Arts. But I was also into painting at the time. Like most of the young students, they think the art history is the history of painting. It's also maybe the easiest thing to do. Like, you don't start with sculpture usually. For sure. It's more space, and it's heavier.
It's more accessible.
So painting is more accessible. So that's what I was thinking I wanted to become a painter. But at this time, in most of the art school in France, painting was having a crisis.
Okay.
Like for most of the people, painting was something of the past, something linked to commodity, something linked to, well, I would say in the end to the 19th century. There was like after 68 and the 70s in France, there were really, the contemporary art really reacted against painting as a commodity or art as a commodity, and promoted a more experimental approach towards art in general. Like, you know, land art, minimal art, and there are not people who are just like behind an easel and doing painting and no figurative painting at all. So I was scared to go to art school and to be disappointed because I would be it would be impossible to paint, and I decided to study in England. Because in England, of course, you had contemporary art, but maybe because of the type of country it is, it's also more conservative. So painting was still accepted in parallel to the more experimental approach. So I went to a small art school in southern England, in Winchester. I stayed there 2 years and did a BA there.
And afterwards you came back to France and went to the Beaux-Arts, right? In Paris?
To the Beaux-Arts in Paris,
yes.
Yeah. Paris School of Art.
And so how was it being in the Beaux-Arts compared to England, regarding what you just said about the approach in France towards painting especially?
That's complicated because I arrived in England, but I was also learning a lot. So I also realized that to be real good painters in the end of the 20th century or the beginning of the 21st century, you had to be committed like 100%. And I realized that the dada artist in me wanted to explore more diversity, and also to go back to these things that you noticed about archaeology and the fact that today my work can have some links to archaeology, but I also think skateboarding and these guys, these Kurt Schwitters and Dadaism, had some link. Like the fact that in the end I preferred working with some things that I find or some processes that I was developing rather than invent or create something out of the blue on the paper. So basically, when I was in England, when I arrived, I had brushes and pigments, and when I left, I had no brushes, and I was making objects and was playing around with the idea of painting. To give you a clearer example, for my degree show, I showed some rabbit skin glue objects. Rabbit skin glue, that would sound very barbarian. So it's a glue made out of rabbit skin that you use to put on the canvases, like all the canvases that you have, to make it stronger and to protect the linen.
Once the painting is done?
Before. You have your stretcher with a stretcher, you put the canvas on the stretcher, and then you apply the rabbit skin glue, and then you put the gesso, and then you paint on it. But what I did is that I used this rabbit skin that could be like a type of resin or to make objects. I had plastic objects and I was putting like layers and layers of rabbit skin, and in the end I had like some bowls and some stuff made out of translucid, these very strange materials that can look like, and I was organizing still lifes on shelves or freestanding objects made out of this. So I was like becoming slowly a sculptor, or being interested in more sculptural approaches, but still with the materials or the history of painting. And then I arrived in Paris. Paris is a huge school,
very famous one.
It is famous and big, and also it doesn't work like any other school in France. It's more linked to the academy, and the schools in Germany, they still work this way. It means that you choose a professor, an artist that you will work under in his class. So each artist in Paris, they have a space and they have a certain amount of students, let's say 30 students. And these students are mixed in between the first and the fifth year, and you all work, or at least you gather in this space. And you have artists representing all the different trends
Okay.
So you had like very figurative painters, you had abstract painters, you had photographs, you had everything, like video artists,
right.
everything. And overall the school must have been like 10 times bigger than my school in Winchester. And I was coming from like a village near Nîmes, or I was coming from this little city of Nîmes, then the little city of Winchester. And I had that was a big deal for me, like being in Paris.
Yeah.
So it took me a lot of time to
adjust,
to get used to it. And the work, I was very lost, so I didn't carry on the type of work that I just described you. I discovered other artists, other ways and method of working, more linked to investigations. When I was in England, I met an artist called Tacitadine, who is an extremely famous artist now. And she was really like a detective. Like she was making investigation, documenting her trips, and working on stories that she heard, making videos, photographs, drawings. And I was completely fascinated by her approach. And it took me years to find my way through hers. But it started this way. I started using photographs to document some concrete objects that could have been sculptures, but that were not. They were just like some random objects forgotten on the side of the roads. And so I started documenting this. And along this, I documented an abandoned experimental track for an air cushion train of the 70s. A train called the Aérotrain in French. So you have a giant track, concrete. It's almost 20 kilometers long, north of Orléans. And so I took a photograph of this space, and then with a friend of mine at that time, Vincent, we committed like 2 years of our study to create a vehicle that could adapt to this rail, and we made a video out of it, and the vehicle was a sculpture itself. And that was what we presented for
your degree
or master degree, whatever.
Okay. So you were still skating while you were going through all this, or was there a point where you kind of stopped skating for a bit? I'm not too sure how much it was still in your life at that time.
I stopped skating at the end of the high school because I hurt myself. I dislocated my shoulder several times and got an operation. I got stuck. And also the skateboarding around that time was going in a very strange phase. Like it was going down, but that was not the problem of the skateboard going down or underground was completely fine with me. But it was also this time where switch stands appeared, skateboarding was getting very technical. And I was much more interested in big lip slides or simple tricks, but
executed well.
And I was doing flippy tricks, but I never could catch on with switch stands, for instance. And at this time, if you didn't manage to do the tricks that were considered hype, you were really considered as a
loser or
a complete loser. And I remember like several like specific moments. And because it was also changing very quickly, but in Nîmes we didn't have like any skate shop. The skate shop were in Montpellier or Toulouse, and so we were pretty isolated, even if it was only 40 kilometers away. And I remember I learned pressure flips. And 360 pressure flips, and I could jump like 3 stairs doing a 360 pressure flip. And I was very proud of myself. And I went to Montpellier, or a skater from Montpellier was around, and he saw me do that and said, "What? You just did a pressure flip, but you cannot do that anymore. Like that's so uncool. Like, do a 360 kickflip, but like not a 360 pressure flip." And I was capable of doing 360 kickflip, but I was like, it's like, how come? Can you tell me like it's uncool and in a very critical way? And around this time, I also remember another anecdote. So we were remote, and the type of clothing we wanted to have at this time were the New Deal, Big Deal baggy pants. But I could not buy them, so I had to order them in a skate shop in Toulouse. And he told me, "Okay, I have this, but it's pretty big." I said, "Well, but it's okay. Pretty big is good, and it's blue, but like very blue. Okay, very blue is good." So I received the pants, and it was actually pretty big and actually pretty blue. But I paid, or my parents paid 500 francs to get a Big Deal at the time. So a Big Deal was a big deal. And so I was wearing it, and all the people in my high school were taking the piss because like nobody was wearing baggy pants. There were not that many skaters around.
Yeah.
But it was okay because I was a skater and I was proud to have my skateboarder outfit.
Right.
But then once again I was going to Montpellier or Toulouse, and someone was looking at me and saying, but you didn't know that the pants were getting like tighter now? Like yours is really too baggy, you know. Now only ravers are wearing this type of pants.
Okay.
And I was like, shit,
are you kidding me? Like
And for me, skateboarding was just about like freedom, and I realized two things. That I was not free anymore because I wanted to look like a skater, and I was not free anymore because like people were also being very judgmental. And that was like, I realized how stupid I was to pay 500 francs at this time.
To get the pants.
Let's say 100 euros for a pair of trousers.
Right.
And I was stupid, and I was skateboarding in Montpellier, and sometimes I would spend a whole day trying flips over steps, trying flip, no slides, flips, things, whatever, and not managing to do any tricks the whole day. I could just have done like a tail slide or just a big crooked grind like I used to do them, and that was the fun out of it. But I was not capable of imposing myself as a skater.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, that's enough. So I committed to the rock band that I had at the time, and then I moved to England, and I didn't bring any skateboard. Okay. And I was just so hooked by fine art that it was okay. But I always skated over the summer when I was back in France.
Yeah, those are good, interesting experiences that you went through. But after those, so it didn't discourage you from skating when you were back home and over the summer?
It did.
And stuff?
Like I suddenly saw myself as a not so skater anymore, like as someone who starts back, like eternally. I considered myself to be older. I was over 20, and so I was like the guy who didn't skate for 6 months and would skate 2 months over the summer. And I was not hype anymore. I was not necessarily following the skate magazines, skate videos. And that was the same in Paris. I didn't have any boards, but my friends in Nîmes started opening a skate shop. So when I was coming over, I said, "Oh, Raphaël, you should have a board and take that one, and I give you the trucks and the wheels." And so I had skateboards, but I was not ready to put any money in it. And when I was in Paris, most of the time I didn't have any skates. Was not skating. And I only started skateboarding again in the year 2000, I think.
And so, at what point would you say that skateboarding sort of came into your art? Because you just mentioned studying, and then you started working, and then you did many exhibitions all over the world, and you did, I wanted to ask you also about I don't know if you say that in English, but a residency at the Villa Médicis in Rome.
Yes.
I think that's where you wrote one of your books. And so, at what point did you start seeing that skateboarding was maybe influencing you in your art and what you were doing?
I think that was just after I graduated from the art school in Paris. So that was in 2002. We did this project with Vincent called the Pentacycle, this bike on the concrete track of this train. And even this, like, there were wheels. It was all about finding a concrete spot somewhere that was not a good spot for skateboarding, but still I thought the methodology was quite similar, mostly to the things that I fancied. Like I remember in Streets on Fire, they go to the giant pipelines somewhere in Arizona or whatever, and that was like, I was so excited towards this type of trips. And I had the feeling that with this train track, that was the same type of infrastructures that we were investigating, but for other reasons. And also around that time, like when you learn about art history and a lot of brainy stuff, like or cultural stuff, suddenly I felt skateboarding was a subculture that was rooting me in the teenage years. And I remembered some of the mottos of skateboarding were shut up and skate, and it was not cool also to be a good student when you were a skater, even in high school or whatever. Like being a skater would be like being bad at school. And it was not very compatible.
It had to be all of your identity. You couldn't be or do anything else, kind of.
So when I was in art school, I almost never referred to my experience as a skater. But I told you I started taking photographs, and among these photographs, I took some photos of a concrete mini ramp in Marseille, then of a concrete halfpipe of the 70s in Brittany near Lorient. And so it started to be influential. And in the year 2002 or 2003, that's another aspect. I also, in my studies, they asked me to write thesis, essays and stuff. And I actually really like this. Writing and investigating, reading and stuff. And so in 2003, like skateboarding was like back in my mind. That was also the beginning of the first websites. There was a website about the history of Dogtown before the films, or just when the films were about to, the first documentary to come out.
Right.
And so I decided to write something, or to start writing about skateboarding. I almost thought I should go back to the university and do a kind of master in sociology, and I was discussing with a friend and said, but you don't need to go to the university, just write it and that's it. And for me, there was something to prove. There was a conflict within me. I was such a big fan of skateboarding, it still haunted me. And I wanted to know if I really wasted all these years of my youth, or if it had some type of interest that goes beyond the activity just to stand on a skateboard.
Right.
And I think art school gave me some theoretical tools to investigate skateboarding. So basically I applied to skateboarding as a type of theoretical or historical approach that you would apply to an artist or an art movement.
Okay. That's a good link, I think, to some of the books that you've written. So I'm not sure in what order they were released, but I think one of the very first one was, in French, it's La Conjonction Interdite.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's the exact translation, but the forbidden conjunction.
Yes.
Yeah. And so can you tell me about maybe this first book and the following ones that you did?
Yeah, exactly. So the forbidden conjunction, La Conjonction Interdite, is the one I was working on in 2003.
Right.
But in 2003 I had the idea to write like a huge book about skateboarding, like covering all the aspects, and I was taking notes about the history of skateboarding, but also about some methodology of skateboarding. And I was interested in an Argentinian writer called George Luis Borges.
Okay.
And the translator of Borges in French is someone called Roger Caillois. And Roger Caillois also wrote theoretical books. And because I discovered him through Borges, I started being interested in Caillois. And I discovered a book he wrote in the 60s about games.
Yes, I have it right here. It's the Les Jeux et les Hommes.
Exactly,
so games and
men and games, or
games.
games and men. I don't know exactly how it translated in English. But that was like the tool that I chose to investigate skateboarding.
Okay.
Because like this book is amazing. Like maybe the sociologists right now would find it outdated or whatever, but for me it really helped me to see clear about like what is a game and what are because in this book he's considering like sport as a game, but chess as a game, theater as a game, so and all this is making like categories to say like we function in certain ways, and within these categories one was like Agon, the competition, and another was like E-Links, the shiver or the something.
The frisson, right? The thrill.
The thrill.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he explains that there are two opposite ways of playing, because if you are a sportsman, you need to be knowledgeable about your like when you are doing karate, like and martial arts, like it's through not the millimeter, but even less than this. So it's all about control. That's what I was looking for. So it's about control, and the E-Links category is about losing control. Like it's jumping. Like how do you say, like so elastic,
like bungee jumping.
Like this type of thing, or roller coasters and this type of things. And I noticed in the book that Caillois had problem positioning skiing, for instance.
Yes.
And for me, that was clear that all the extreme games, or what we say in French, sport de glisse, were actually in between the thrill and the control.
Right.
Or that the control was directed towards more thrill.
Yes.
And so that helped me categorizing skateboarding and to try to see how it fitted in Kaiwo's theory, and so how it fitted among other games and other sports.
And so after this one, another one you made was, in French it's Chronologie lacunaire du skateboard, so like a chronology of skateboarding, basically.
Yes.
It's also, another title for it is a Day with No Waves. And so it's basically, like a history of skateboarding, like year by year. And you say, well, you reference what brand started, what big event might have occurred, or which skater was born, for example. And so, tell me about working on this other book.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of the anniversary issues of big magazine like Thrasher, Transworld, and when they had like chronologies. And that's what I love. That I don't know exactly why, but I was always driven through chronologies. And when I was doing my researches, I was collecting very especially this magazine, and I was like copying them in a Word file on my computer.
Right.
And then it became my notebook. I had the chronology of, let's say, the 20th anniversary of Thrasher magazine. And whenever I discovered something new about skateboarding in France or in the US or wherever, I was putting it in the chronology. And then the chronology started growing and growing and growing and growing. Yeah. And I realized that there were holes in this chronology, that I didn't know how the flat ground ollie started. Right. Because they didn't say it precisely in the chronology. Okay. And then books started to came out, like Jan Borden's book about skateboarding and other books. So I ordered these books on the internet and read them, and as soon as I was finding some very precise information,
you would put it into your...
I would put it in the chronology. Okay. So basically I gathered all the books that was available about skateboarding at that time, and all the magazines I could access. At first I didn't have that many. I went to Marseille because I had some friends who were really nerds and who had piles of Thrasher magazines, but that was not all of them. And also I was missing some more recent magazine. And I went to Nozbone skate shop in Paris, and I explained I was working on this, and the first little book had a small amount of success, like there was some articles in French skate magazines. So when I was in Nozbone, I knew a little bit about what I was doing, so it helped. And also I could go and take as many magazines as I wanted, and I was like going through them, and mostly the first part of the magazine when you have the news about the industry and and the contest and the thing. And I was like putting all this information and cross-referencing the information. Like if a magazine was saying something, I was trying to find on the internet if that was true or if another person was doing this. But you have to keep in mind that was the first decades of the internet. There were no podcasts like yours. There were no all this amount of information.
It was difficult to gather all this information, I'm sure.
So the first chronology came out in 2005, and then I updated it
until
2009.
Right.
And now, sometimes it crosses my mind that I should try to extend it to...
I wanted to ask you if you were considering doing it.
I would, and I'd like to. One of the problems is that I don't have as much time as I used to have. Like, I was not that very famous as an artist, so I had a lot of time for myself. But now, even if I found time or even some money to dedicate to such a project, I wouldn't know how to catch up. Like,
there's been so much going on since 2009.
There's so much going on, and also too much input. And so the hard thing now would be to edit all this information. Because like you are going to all the sub-stories to the sub-stories to the sub-stories. Now you can do like one book like this just about skateboarding in Paris or skateboarding in Portland or in Birmingham. And suddenly it's too much. But basically what the chronology is the story of skateboarding as it was told by the skate magazines and the books. So I think it's not very innovative, but maybe what's new is the way it was written. Like I wrote a book for non-skaters.
Right.
Like each time, if I am using a word, I am describing the word.
Yeah, I remember you would explain what a kickflip is, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so whenever, if you have a holly, for me that was my the best pleasure that I had is that actually a lot of people who were not into skateboarding but mostly into histories of subculture in general really enjoyed the book.
Okay.
But this type of people, they would read the history of reggae music in Kingston. They would be interested in the evolution of punk music in London or New York, or the history of I don't know, psychedelic posters in San Francisco. You know, this type of people. And also within the art world, some art critics, some art historians were really interested in the two first books, and I thought at least I achieved something. And then I was surprised because actually even within the small French skateboarding world, the book was considered as quite successful. So that was good. I never thought the Forbidden Conjunction or the chronology would have
such a big impact.
Or any impact, because I didn't think skateboarders were reading.
Well, I don't think a lot of them read, but maybe more nowadays.
No, but like I'm saying this as a kind of an offense to the skaters, but it's just an expression of what I felt as a teenager. But also I didn't realize that skateboarding or the skateboarding world was much more diverse than I was thinking, and also the age of the skaters was a lot different. A lot of the skaters were doing were going to the university, studying sociology, anthropology, architecture, fine art, and so they developed in the same way I developed. That they kept their passion for skateboarding, but they enriched it
with other
things,
other subjects. And so the next one was Freeride. So this one you wrote when you were in Rome. In this one you talk about cycloid transitions. And when I got here you just showed me one that, I don't know if you built it or people with you conceived it.
I designed it, I drew it, but I didn't build it with my hand and my saws and jigsaws and stuff. So Freeride for me was like the real bridge that I needed or that I wanted from the moment I got out of school. Like the two first books, nobody should care who wrote it. The fact that my main activity is being a fine artist, a sculptor, has no meaning. Like you can read it as a skater, and if I was someone from the university or if I was a baker or whatever, you don't get a lot of information out of this. It's really about skateboarding and not about art. But Freeride is a bridge, like it's about skateboarding and all the stuff, about spaces in general and geometrical spaces, and also it makes a link in between a certain type of practice within sculpture in the 60s and the 70s, an evolution of sculpture, like sculptures that you can actually climb on or that you can use, or with movements like minimal art or synetical art in Europe. And at the end also there is a chapter on writing modern art, my collection of skaters on public art and what it means.
I have it right here.
So and that was way before the writing modern art photo book.
That you published later.
It was published. But I already started to show some of these photographs in museums.
To illustrate your ideas.
No, that's a completely thing. Not to illustrate my idea, but as a work of art. And I know it's very hard to understand that because I showed that in the Lyon Biennale maybe in 2008, 2009. The installation that I showed was a modern sculpture of the 30s by an artist called Katarzyna Kobro, a Polish artist. So it's a sculpture made by somebody else, like not me, in the middle of a space. And all around the sculpture, some photographs of skaters on public sculptures. but photographs taken by professional or not, but skate photographers.
Okay.
And I contacted the skate photographers and I asked them the right and pay them the right to print their photographs in black and white and choose the format and install them around this sculpture.
Okay.
And this installation, very conceptual installation, was my work.
Okay.
A work made out like a curator or like a publisher of the magazine.
Yes.
Like some people are known as gatherers more than makers. And I know it can seem strange, and I'm not the inventor of this in the contemporary art. If some other very famous artist didn't work this way, I would not be allowed myself to call myself an artist and to present such a work. That's really linked to what we call conceptual art in the history of the 20th century. So I was making this type of artworks, like about documentation, but was also making photographs and sometimes sculptures. But this last chapter is really like an explanation of this gesture to show within the museum this photograph of skaters on public sculptures and why I was tempted to link it to a modern sculptures. And these sculptures of Cobro, and she's very famous for using right angles, only metal planes, and curves like half circles. So any skaters who would go in the Pompidou Museum, for instance, and who would see the Katarzyna Cobros that they have there, would immediately see it as a skate ramp. But it is not a skate ramp. It was made in the 30s, but what we associate to it is a skate ramp. And my work was to investigate, okay, it looks like a skate ramp, but does it mean something else? Like, can you make something out of this likeness, like this ressemblance?
Yes, okay. I had a question about, I don't remember in which book you mentioned this, but you talk about how children could appreciate art, so to speak, better than adults sometimes because they weren't biased and they could just have an interaction with a work of art that an adult wouldn't have the same experience, basically. Can you tell me a bit about what happens, perhaps? Why do adults, why don't they interact with art the same way?
It's not really an idea of mine. I think it's an idea of an art historian and critic who was writing about minimal art of the 60s and 70s. And when people like Robert Morris or Carl Andre were making artworks that you have to walk on or that you have to push or whatever, it was hard for the spectators around that time to allow themselves to be part of the artwork or to experiment it physically.
Yes.
For a lot of them, that was not what the aesthetical relationship is about.
Yes.
So they wouldn't want to do that. They would not consider it. And so some children who were visiting the shows, they would directly climb upon it and activate the piece in a way the more traditional spectators would never do.
Yes.
Because it's not that they are not physically capable of doing it, it's because also they have no interest, and for them that's not what art should be about, so they would not do it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, intuitively speaking, a child would understand better a piece by Carl Andre. Carl Andre is only putting metal plates on the floor, and he says this, like, you have to walk on it to understand the piece.
Yeah.
And if you walk on it with tennis shoes, you have no sound.
Yeah.
You cannot tell if copper sounds differently than a different type of metal in this case. Yeah. But if you have like hard shoes or if you have high heels, whatever, suddenly you have like the sound and it resonates. And that's what a child would do, like if he's running onto it or if he's like knocking on it with I don't know, with whatever toy that he has in his hand. He will make the sculpture sound and he will reveal the piece.
And so I just talked before about the cycloid ramp or transition. I was interested in this because from what I understood, so ramps are usually built like a mini ramp, for example, or a vert ramp, whatever. There's a bit of vertical, and then it curves, and then there's a flat bottom for a bit, and then the exact same shape on the other side. And a cycloid transition is basically the fastest way to go from one point to the other, from what I understood. Mm-hmm. And at the time when you first wrote about this, apparently there weren't any cycloid transitions that had been built. But since then, you have built some with the help of friends. And so can you tell me about this? And I think I heard about it through a Thrasher piece or something.
I heard about it through Galileo, like the astronomer, because he was studying gravity. He wanted to find ways to prove that the sun was at the center of the universe. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to study free fall. And to study free fall, he started throwing balls on inclined planes and on curves.
Right.
And in your description, you said curve.
Yeah.
But a curve is nothing in itself. Like, it's a family. In curves, you have a lot of curves.
Different.
What you meant when you described the mini ramp is that you had the vertical part, let's say, and and then you have an arc of a circle.
Yes.
But for me, I know you said that because we were speaking English and we are French.
Yeah.
But for me too, a curve was an arc of a circle. Mm-hmm. And for Galileo too, when he made his apparatuses, he used arc of a circle.
Yeah.
And so he knew, or he measured, that an arc of a circle, if you put the ball on it, it goes faster to the 0 point.
Okay.
In geometry, like the shortest path between 2 points, you know that it's a straight line.
Straight line, yeah.
But if you apply gravity to that, the fastest way in between a high point and a low point is not an inclined plane. This is a straight line, and the shortest.
Yeah.
The curve that you have, like an arc of a circle in between the two, is longer, but it is faster.
It is faster, right.
So it's almost the same, not with gravity, that the idea of the peripheric in Paris.
Yeah, okay.
If you want to go to my place, to the northern part of Paris, and if you go the straight line, you will have all the red lights, and you will go very slow. But if you take the very long peripheric, actually you have less...
don't have stoplights and stuff, so
exactly.
you'll
So
go faster.
It is faster.
Yes,
so that's the type of ideas.
Okay.
And so basically I started to investigate other type of curvatures.
Yeah.
So we could have used ellipses instead of arc of circles. We could have used this cycloid, which is a very interesting curve because some physicists after Galileo in the 18th century, they managed to prove, I don't know exactly how, mathematically speaking, but they managed to prove that this is the fastest curve on Earth for a ball. And I would never have had this idea that there was such a thing as the fastest curve. I would not have thought about it as a concept. I would not think it exists. For me, I would think it depends on the height or the type of the radius or the radiuses of the ellipses or whatever. So I thought it was a bit too complicated and you have to test too many things to find out. And suddenly, as a skater, to know that such a thing exists, I was just fascinated with the cycloid. And I know that the purpose of a skateboard ramp is to be the fastest. But at the same time, being very interested in mini ramps, I noticed that skaters had the tendency to want the mini ramps to be fast, and for the mini ramps to be fast, they were diminishing the radius. So they were, let's say, classically mini ramps would have 1 meter and 40 centimeters radius. Right. And it's considered too flat and too slow. So to make it quicker, faster, they would go around 1 meter 20. Okay. It is steeper. But as a skater, the problem I have with this type of strategy is that I find the curve to be too small. And if you ollie, or the curved part of the mini ramp is very small, and then suddenly you're on the flat bottom and you don't have much space to take speed again. And what I liked about the cycloid, it was very progressive. You don't have one center like a circle, and so it starts very slow and then it's getting steeper and it goes to the vertical right at the end. So I found it very handy because you can lock very easily if you want to do a Smith grind or this type of trick. And then if you ollie into it, even if you are not putting your wheels just below the coping when you go down, you still have curves and you can still take or gain speed. So I thought that should be interesting. But my friends at Constructo skate park, for instance, they say no, that's not possible. it's important to have a constant radius, otherwise the body is not adjusting, or I don't know if it's exactly what they explained, but they were doubtful. For them, there was like a geometrical and mechanical reason for skaters to use arcs of circle. And to me, the only reason is that it's the only curve that is easy to draw. You can just like you have a nail in the board, you take a string, and you have a perfect circle, and you have the perfect circle.
Right.
The thing is that an ellipse, it has two centers, so an ellipse is very complicated to draw, but still it is possible to draw ellipses. Some architects in the Renaissance or Baroque, they used ellipses a lot. Some gardeners, they use ellipses, and they know how to trace them just with strings and nails, just like we do on our quarter pipes when we build them. But the cycloid, it's just impossible. Even with two nails, it's too difficult to draw. So basically that was the problem. And today with the CC machine, you just have to send the equation of the curve to the computer that is driving the CC machine to have the cycloid. And so it's also this technical possibility, even if today the CC machine, like, it's not something crazy, like everybody has this type of machine now. So that was a possibility, and that was not that difficult to build. So I knew about this, and then by chance in a Thrasher magazine I read an article about that. Like somebody in the end of the 80s already thought about the idea of a cycloid ramp. And it's funny, the article is great. He mentions Galileo and all the people that I've read about. I just couldn't believe it. And you know, I was like proud. I thought I discovered something with Galileo and like connecting it to a skateboard ramp. And then suddenly you have to be modest and say, well, basically everybody has the same ideas all over the world.
Somebody thought about it before me.
But it was okay. And at the end of the article is that theoretically speaking it works, on the paper it works, but we have to try to build it. And they knew it was difficult to build. And also, why would you spend money to try to build something that might not work when you could build like just a standard mini ramp and have fun with it? So basically the year after that I was invited to participate in a Biennale in New York. And for this Biennale I managed to gather enough money to build the first cycloid mini ramp. It was not very impressive, it was rather small, and it had only one part with a normal curve, like the arc of a circle. You see I go on with the curve again, so with the arc of a circle. And so that was the first trial. But nobody knew a lot about this ramp in New York, so it was not heavily skated. So I didn't have much feedback, and I think the form of the ramp, sculpturally speaking, was not very interesting.
Interesting. What year was that in New York?
2011, I think. 2012 maybe. And 5 or 6 years after that, let's say the French Ministry of Culture, like a part of them, who is commissioning artworks to artists, they called me to imagine an outdoor piece that could exist only on paper, that you would not need to store. But they have the plan or they have the idea, and if someone wants to build it, or if a city needs an artwork for outside, they can make it. So I went back to the idea of the cycloid ramp, and I made something that I would not be too ashamed to show to Katarzyna Kobro, the Polish sculptor who did her piece in the 30s. So I made it more sculptural. And the idea was really to make something also more comparative. So I had the cycloid, I had different type of curves, different heights, but I also had an inclined plane included to the ramp
to compare everything.
And also with the idea to compare, because my thing was like, how much of a flat bottom do I have to put in between two cycloids? Do I have to put flat bottom or not? So to resolve this, I decided that the plan of the ramp would not be rectangular but triangular. So it means that the flat would be, let's say, 3 meters at the base and 0 at the top. And then you would have all the curves, either cycloid or arch of a circle. So they are not like just in front of of each other. They are at an angle.
I see.
And also I like this shade because when I was in Rome, I discovered Baroque architecture. And in Baroque architecture, sometimes I use fake perspective or accelerated perspective. You have the impression that columns, they all have the same size, but actually in the end they are much smaller. So it looks longer.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
And when you photograph my cycloid ramp, it is triangular, so it also looks longer. It has like a perceptive effect that I find rather interesting, and that also changing the morphology of the skateboard ramp.
Okay. Kind of a random question, but I was interested in asking you about the Galerie Mitterrand. I don't know much about art and being an artist, a contemporary artist like yourself, but I was just wondering, how does this collaboration with a gallery work, and how is it beneficial to you and to them? How do you collaborate together, and since when have you been working with them?
Okay. Galleries in general for visual artists are the equivalent of an agent for an actor or
singer,
designer, whatever. But it works in a different way, that basically we share the amount of a sale by 50-50. If I sell something, if I'm lucky, 10,000 euros, let's say, 5,000 goes to me, 5,000 goes to the gallerist.
Okay.
But the gallerist is supposed to have the network.
Yes.
Like he's supposed to have the collectors. He's supposed to represent older and more famous artists than you.
Yeah.
So I started working with Mitterrand when I was 30, I think. Okay. So it was like almost 14 years ago. And that was great. I mean, like, we had a great collaboration. I just quitted the gallery recently, and I'm starting working with another gallery, Galerie Mitterrand in Paris, right now. I have also galleries in Zurich and a gallery in São Paulo. Okay. What you have to know is that, at least in France, you can only have one gallerist in your country, and you're not allowed to sell without your gallerist. Okay. If a collector, or if you tell me, I like this piece, can I buy it
directly to you?
I say, no. Morally speaking, there is no. I didn't sign anything with Mitterrand. I didn't sign anything with Galerie Mitterrand. Yeah. Some galleries today are having you sign papers, but usually it's just a moral contract that you will commit to the collaboration. Yeah. And for me, that was very fruitful. That was very through Michel that I was capable of living off my work. Yeah. And for the last 12 to 13 years, my main income is the sale of my work. Of your work, yeah. And sometimes I'm also teaching in art schools. Most of my friends, they need to teach full-time. Full-time is 2 days a week, so it's okay. But when I was teaching and when I had financially to teach, I was teaching in Annecy. So I have to travel from Paris all the way over there twice a month and stay in Annecy 4 days, pay my hotel, pay my train tickets. I also taught in Angers, in the art school of Angers. And then when the galleries started making more sales, I decided I would not be a teacher, a full-time teacher. Okay. But I still go to art school very often for diploma, lectures, studio visits.
Do you go to the Beaux-Arts since you studied over there? Have you ever taught over there?
Yeah, I taught for 1 semester. Okay. I took the place of an artist who went on a residency. But apart from that, it's very, very difficult. I tried twice and almost got the job. A job, a position at the art school, but there were
it must be very difficult,
artists.
I'm sure. Yeah, a lot of people want that job, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to ask you also about this piece that you worked on in 2016, I believe, with the Isle Skateboards crew. It was a video project called Paving Space. Yeah. The video was directed by Dan Magee. So tell me about this project and working with them on doing that video.
Yeah, so for me it's not a video. For me it's a sculptural project. Yes. The video is really Dan's, and the photographs were made by Maxime Verret. And so that was a collaboration. I knew Sylvain Tonieli because he participated in a project of mine, which was a replica of a minimalist sculpture that was skated on Freeride is the title of this sculpture.
Okay.
That also gave the title to my book, or
the book.
I took from my book. So I knew Sylvain from that, and this event was sponsored by Carhartt.
Right. Yeah.
And Carhartt, through Bertrand Trichet, also helped me a lot with the books to publish them, or also the English translation of the chronology and the Forbidden Conjunction. So that was like a network. Carhartt, Sylvain Tonieli, and at one point Sylvain was also sponsored by Carhartt and the co-founder of Isle Skateboards. They had a collab together, and they came to see me asking me to do something for them, like a sculptural thing.
Okay.
And
to skate.
To skate.
Right.
And I was not like, that was not my thing. Like, I didn't want to dedicate to skatable sculptures.
Right.
For me, that was not an idea in itself. That was not enough as an idea. But suddenly Sylvain really said like the magic words. He said, but we don't want you to be distracted from what you are doing. I say, okay, exactly what you have to say to me. So I'm just back from Germany, where I was in a museum of mathematics, and I discovered some modules, small plaster module of a guy called Arthur Schönflies, a mathematician of the end of the 19th century. And I want to make something out of these modules.
Right.
And there is one of them, because he did many with different type of geometries, only straight lines. There was one that was kind of half of a truncated pyramid. Okay. And say maybe this one could be useful for skateboarding. And Sylvain looked at it and said, wow, yeah, that would be good. I say, but it's 45 degrees angle.
So it's quite steep.
It's steep. It's not like that nice. He said, okay, you do your job and you try to do whatever you want and you feel comfortable with the sculpture, and we will adapt to it. And suddenly that was the first time of my life that I didn't have the stress to make an art piece that would go directly to a museum or to an art galleries. Because when you do a show at the Palais de Tokyo or in New York, it's meaningful. Like if you don't do the good piece, maybe you will not have the good show, or you will not sell the piece, or whatever. So there is a kind of
pressure.
There is pressure. But now I was working with Carhartt, and they were offering me, not me, but they were offering to produce a piece around 10,000 euros. Okay. And if the piece is successful, that was great. And if the piece was a failure, it would be okay. It will be in the skate community and skate networks, the skate video, and that will be safe. Like nobody in the art world would know about it. Okay. That would be fine. Okay. So I think as an artist, maybe I took more risks. And also I had the financial possibility to develop a project that I was not 100% sure about. Okay. It was solid oak. So each module is very heavy, I'm sure. Very, very difficult to build. So we had to hire very skilled and gifted wood carpenters. Carpenters, actually. Almost ebonist, we say. I'm not sure what the translation. Whatever, but very trained and skilled. And I was discovering the possibility, because the modules, there is only one module, one geometry, and it is repeated 8 times. Okay. I enlarged the Schönflies module to the size of a bench. So the height of the module was 42, and all the different measurements were related to 42. Okay. So 42 was the height, 84 was the width, and 168 was the length. And with this module, you can, like a jigsaw puzzle, assemble it. That was also the purpose of the mathematician. But I did maquettes, but I didn't realize with maquettes exactly how to assemble, because I was trying to assemble them the way the mathematician was with his rules. But then I realized that the 42 centimeter high, you could double the height by having 2 modules. But then they didn't fit together. You have to put a module below to make it stable or whatever. So it started to be very fun. And when I managed through a contact of mine to have a very large space in the Palais de Tokyo for the experiment. That was not a show. That was just like some people who knew my work and say, okay, this space is free, do your experiment, and that's it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so we had this space, and we learned about the modules together. I had a couple of configurations in mind, but Sylvain and other people at Isle, Nick Jensen, and all the other. Joseph Bier was there too, even though it's not Isle, but
Carhartt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we had some small scale maquette of the modules.
Yeah.
And we were putting them in a certain order. They were skating them, and when they were tired of it or when they had another idea, we went moving them and doing another type of obstacle.
Okay.
And at the same time, I was like observing all this and also finding configuration that were definitely not good for skateboarding, but that had sculptural potential that I would be very happy to show within an exhibition and without skaters. Okay. So that's how this project developed. Okay. And it's amazing because it's still very present today. Yeah. Like I've been invited to a museum north of Vancouver. Okay. Going in a couple of weeks. Oh yeah. And they build 9 modules, and when you build 9 modules, it's a lot of commitment. Yeah. So there will be a Paving Space event in this museum, and then it will be presented in the show.
When we got in touch a few months ago, you told me that you were going to do a project with Nozbone, and with, I think Sylvain was associated with it as well.
Yeah, well, I'm the lucky one because like he's also sponsored by Nozbone, so it's another good occasion to
hang out with him.
To hang out and to see him skate.
And so, what was this project?
It's what you see behind you. These 2 columns. Oh yeah. Alexis from Nozbone wanted to have a sculpture of mine in the shop. And that's always the same. Like, I don't see myself as a skate obstacle tuner. Like you say, like when you tune a car, like I love skate obstacles so much, and I love DIY spots so much that I think they are like, and there are so many people working on this that they are more collectively more intelligent and more gifted, and they have more ideas than me. So if it's just making one skate obstacle, then it has no meaning to me. The meaning is like I meet or I discover objects in a science museum and I see a connection or a possibility with a skateboard move or an activation by skaters, and suddenly this is an object that I had to make even if the skaters were not interested, but it helped me investigate more. Okay. That's this type of connection that I like. It's making like in one object 2, 3, 4 different worlds to connect.
Collide, yeah. Okay.
And so that I had to find an idea, or I had to listen to myself and my desire. And I was working on different things, like at the moment Scottish and English sundials from the 18th century. Okay. So there are not replicas of these sundials, but there are some aspects of the geometry that relates to them. And the type of curves that you have is also linked to the cycloid and other curves. Okay. You see different curves. When you look at them closely, you can see that all of them are different. Oh, really? So one of them is an arc of a circle, one of them is an ellipse, one of them is a cycloid, another one is a hyperbola and a parabola. All this, like, you have 6 different curves. Okay, yeah. And then these sculptures, which is like a column or a totem, you put him horizontally and it becomes like just a ledge, or what we used to call like... when I was a kid or a teenager, we call that une poutre à rock. Yeah, like only people skating in the 80s would know the expression. Okay. So like it's a flat bar. Okay. And so we installed them maybe 500 meters from where I live, and on the skateboard spot where I do slappies now. And that was just a small session. Actually, it's not like you cannot do that many different tricks on it, but we had a very good photographer, Thibault Lenour, and there will be also a video, a skate video, and the sculpture will be in Nozbone in a couple of weeks.
Do you know when the video is supposed to come out?
I would say mid-September. Okay.
So usually I end up this podcast with one question before we head into the French questions. Okay. The last question I ask usually the guests is, what's the most valuable lesson that you feel that you've learned from skateboarding?
I'm not sure if I got it through skateboarding, but I think that to me skateboarding is to see skateboarding as a methodology, like to observe the world, to document the world, to adapt to the world, and only if needed, then you have to build something and to arrange forms and stuff. And that's still what I'm doing as an artist, and I hope that's what I am doing as an individual and as a person. So I would say, like, in the best case, case, like skateboarding taught me to be more aware of some of the things around, and that I think that's still what it should be.
Okay, let's finish this with the friends' questions. So this first question is from Bertrand Trichet from Carhartt. So he said, if Marcel Duchamp was a famous current skateboarder, who would it be and why?
That's very, very difficult, because Marcel Duchamp is a revolutionary, but he's also a very lazy artist. Like the catalogue raisonné de Duchamp is maybe like 100 times less big than Picasso. So who would that be?
So lazy but revolutionary,
Lazy
right?
and revolutionary. But honestly, I think in a way, like Rodney Mullen is not lazy, so it's not exactly him. But maybe someone like Neil Blender or something else. It would not be Marc Gonzalez. It would be too easy, difficult. Bertrand, I will think about it.
Okay, perfect. Alright, this one is from Arnaud de Dieu. So he said, I'd be curious to know what you honestly think of all these skatable artworks that are popping up, especially in Bordeaux. Can we refer to these as artworks outside of the art realm? Isn't it kind of a devaluation of art and skateboarding for that matter?
It's a very interesting question. And it depends the point of reference that I take. I think skateable sculpture is a nice concept to get rid of some limitation of the people who are saying like, is it a skate park? If it is a skate park, you must be like 20 centimeters away from that, and the curve should be this and that. All this control thing. And at the moment you say that, but no, this is not a skate park, this is a sculpture, then you get more freedom. And also, because of the concept of art, you might get more respect from a city hall or whatever. So as a tool, I think it's fantastic because it helps developing new forms. But then I'm not always formally or aesthetically, I'm not always amazed by the skatable sculptures. And my problem sometimes is they are just like a nicely painted skate obstacle. But I also was very, very impressed of the Freebasing by Theme Park years ago. Like that was a wooden skate bowl, but on pilotis in French, so high up. It means it was in a very big biennale, I don't know where. It's written in the chronology. So basically you can walk beneath the structure and you see it like a boat, and you see all the woodwork, and then you have skaters on top.
Yes, I think there's a photo of it in the book, right?
Most probably maybe in Freeride.
I'll pull it out,
And also you have all the acoustic experience, because we all had this experience to sit inside the mini ramp, to be in the shade, to protect from the sun. And you have like this acoustic experience, like this reverb of the skateboarding. That's what this artist, Theme Park, managed to transfer to the general public. And then I was also very, very impressed by the moving units, I think that's what they were called, by the side effect of urethane in London. They were like, I think, very thoughtful sculptures and stuff. So for me, a skatable sculpture is like a normal sculpture. It's not because it exists that it will be good as an artwork. And now I see some art students and architecture students who come to see me or send me messages on Instagram because they did a skatable sculpture and they think I will automatically like it.
Approve of it.
And I approve the energy, the idea, but not necessarily the artwork,
the result
in itself. And it's also linked, like it's been said, like I'm trained as a conceptual artist. I did like long studies. So for me, art has an history. When I'm making an artwork, I want this artwork to last. I want this artwork to be able to stand in a museum next to some very strong artist. It means that I am not like a self-taught artist. When I do something, I do it with the consciousness of the people that came before me. And so that makes me humble and very arrogant at the same time. Because basically I want to enter history, but I also know that enter history sometimes is just like leaving a footnote. It's not being Marcel Duchamp once again. And sometimes some of the skatable sculptures, or some people who didn't go to art school and who have like a very heavy painting practice, and they think art is about just self-expression, but for me it's as if you would do a skate video again and you will skate exactly the same spot and exactly do the same tricks that was done already once or 50 times. And when I am with skaters, with professional skaters, I'm always like amazed to see that, say, oh no, but he did that on this one, so I cannot do my trick there, or at least not this way. And I'm like, relax, you could do it. And I say, no, I cannot just relax. I mean, like,
the unwritten rules of skateboarding.
But it's a rule or it's a shared history, and they want to make it different and whatever. So basically, they have the problem that I have as an artist.
Yeah.
And as a non-professional skater, sometimes I think their problem is actually not relevant at all. That I don't mind if they do the same trick again, because that would be 10 years after, or that would be with a different style.
And it's a different person, so it will be different. So,
and so I understand that a self-taught artist would exactly tell the same thing to me. I don't care if this guy or this woman did a piece like this before me or whatever. Like, I don't care about this history. I just want to do it myself, and that's fine with it. I understand it, but that's not exactly what I am hoping for of like high art, let's say.
Alright, this one is from Sylvain Tonieri. Actually, we mentioned him a few times. This is a funny one. He said, tomorrow morning at breakfast, an alien comes to knock on your door. You are surprised, but he seems pretty nice. He says he heard about you through Paving Space. He says he comes from a galaxy filled with geometrical shapes unknown to man, and that you can go with him right this minute to study them for a few years and then come back to Paris with all of your work. The thing is, only rollerblading is authorized on his planet. It is mandatory to rollerblade for at least an hour every day. His spaceship is leaving from Place d'Italie in 30 minutes. What do you decide?
I'm going straight ahead and I will rollerblade for the rest of my life.
Okay, that's a good answer.
Silva.
When he sent me this, I was laughing. I was like, wow, that's pretty funny. This one is from Soy Pandey, who I saw a few weeks ago. So he said, hi Raphaël, it seems to me that art as a concept has become somewhat obscure, difficult to define, and I'd be curious to know what is, according to you, the purpose of art, and therefore the role of an artist within society.
Wow, sorry.
That's hard to answer on the spot.
Very thoughtful. I think it's okay, the diversity, and maybe the purpose of art is to express the diversity of the world, but maybe to express this diversity as this extreme point, like to do that like no other people take time. If you're choosing to do something very simple, like there is an artist who chooses to dedicate his whole life into writing numbers on the canvas. He started at 1 and he finished at I don't know how many million. He died, but like he took that seriously, and everybody could do that. But he dedicated his life to that, and it's commitment. So I think maybe the purpose of art is to express the diversity of the world with the maximum of commitment. Even if you're lazy, you can express your laziness. Like you can commit to your laziness. to your laziness. Like Leonardo da Vinci committed to his laziness. Like he didn't produce that many paintings, but only because he thought that painting was not the most important thing to do, and so he had to make engineer work. He had to explore geometry and mathematics and the inside of the body. So, but because he did that, he was a lazy painter who did not finish his work. So that's an example. And also from my study in art school, I think this question of definition of an artwork, or of what is art, not of an artwork, but what is art, it's a philosophical problem. We call that aesthetic, like the branch of philosophy which study what art is. And at some point, with all the revolutions of the 20th century, the only good answer to that, and I'm borrowing it from an American philosopher called Nelson Goodman, is that it's not a question of what is art. It's not possible to answer that anymore, but we have to switch to when is art. So it's a question of context. And for me, I'm a type of artist who was taught art within this importance of the context. It's where you stand. That's why the question of the skateable sculpture was very interesting too, because it depends if you stand within the context of the skate community or if you stand in the context of the art community. And when I say art, it's high art. And when I say high art, it must be strange, but there was a very famous exhibition in the MoMA in New York 20 years ago called The High and the Low, about the connection between the high culture of the museums, of the universities and stuff, and the subcultures from comic books to TV programs and these things. And there's always been connections in between these different cultures, but it just depends where you decide to watch, like where you watch. And this is also a very Galilean question. You cannot study motion if you don't set your camera
where you're looking from.
Like if you want to study the motion of a ship, when you put your camera in the ship or on the shore, like in the harbor, and that will change totally the definition of motion. And to me, this is the same with art. So I'm not very sorry. I'm not.
You're skipping a bit.
Essentialist. No, I'm not an essentialist. I don't think art is a single thing. I'm going to museum exhibitions, and most of the time I'm disappointed with what I see, and sometimes I'm thinking I'm getting old and I don't like anything anymore, and suddenly like one show after 10 I see something and I don't exactly know why, or it will take me a lot of time to figure it out. I have this same thrill, this same feelings, this same emotion, and I said it's okay, it's just that I need to see 10 shows to have one that I really like. And I suppose I don't go to the cinema as often as before, but for a cinema fan I think it's exactly the same. You don't like all the films that you go and see.
You're not amazed every time you go see.
And when I watch skateboard videos now, I'm bored most of the time.
Exactly.
But suddenly I see a session or an edit that I find amazing.
It sparks you again.
And that's.
Okay, this one is from Dan Magee. So, which of your favorite non-contemporary sculptors would be the best at designing skatable objects? And choose one piece of their art that you'd like to transform into an obstacle with a few tweaks. That's a bit of a complex question, but so favorite non-contemporary sculptors.
Okay, I think I don't know the name of the sculptor, but there are huge sundials in India, in Jaipur and in Delhi, with a lot of curves and a lot of steps, and these are completely magical objects, scientific objects, but they are also like almost perfect skate parks, which don't work. So I think these people in Delhi, whoever they were, would be the best people to build skate parks and skate obstacles. And also they would have like amazing marbles, and they are amazing colorists. So I would say these artists or craftsmen who build them. Or maybe the people who build the pyramids, but that's almost the same idea.
This one is from Arthur Chiron, who's another artist.
I was a student in Angers when I was a teacher.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you were his teacher. Okay. He said, I remember back in the days reading skateboard magazines and the way skateboarders were often asked in interviews about their top 3. Today I'd like to ask yours. Can you tell us about your top 3 contemporary artists, books, movies, music bands?
Okay. Tacitadine, that I quote, in a completely different field, I would say Gabriel Orozco, a Mexican artist that I really love. And in a very different world, Hippolyte Engen, a duo of women artists, French artists.
And so...
But that's a little bit biased, I would say.
What about like books or movies or music bands? Do you want to pick one of those maybe?
Music bands, I mean like... Let's say at the moment, Low, L-O-W, it's a band that I really like slowcore. Stereolab is a band that I really like too. And what would be the third one? It will be like Bill Callahan, I would say, like folk singer. And books, I would pick up only like novels, and I would say anything by the French writer Jean Echenoz. Anything by the Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges. I don't know.
Yes, you mentioned him earlier.
And anything by the Italian writer Italo Calvino. All of them were very important in different moments of my life, but any other books.
Okay, I have 3 last questions. Let's do this one.
Hey Raph, how's it going? So I wanted to ask you a bit about your collaborative process with the artist Christian Heidacker. I know you two have been friends and worked together for a long time. And I just kind of wondered what that does to your own practice. Does it kind of make you challenge your own ideas, or what's it like to have another artist kind of engaging with your ideas? Do you sort of like discover things about your own work you previously didn't know, or is it sort of, does it challenge your ego in any way, like, oh, I want to do it this way and this person wants to do it that way? So yeah, I just wondered if you could just give me a brief description of what it's like, what collaboration feels like, and how it helps or challenges your own practice. Thanks, mate. Bye.
That was Nick.
Yes, Nick Jensen, Isle founder and pro skater.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Nick's a great painter too. And we have this common friend, Christian Hidaka.
Yep.
And Christian I met when I was a student in Winchester, so a long time ago. We do a lot of duo shows.
Okay.
And basically, Nick, I would say that, at least in my fantasy, because I've always been like a shitty guitar players, but I had a couple of bands. But basically, what we do with Christian, I would say, is what I would dream of doing if I was a good musician with another guitarist or another musician.
Okay.
And I think we play a very different instrument, but we like the same type of music, and we are really complementary.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my practice is rather solitary, even though I'm working with a lot of craftsmen, but the process is rather solitary. But to work with Christian is always so stimulating. And it helps us both to go to territories that we cannot go, because like suddenly we can almost vampirize or like take the works. Like he's doing amazing wall paintings, and maybe one day I will be capable of doing a wall painting of my own. But at the moment I'm very happy to have this tool and this pictorial possibilities, like to have painting as a background, painting as a tool to divide a space or to complexify a space. And I think Christian, who is representing a lot of objects in his painting, suddenly he can play with something very physical, like a sculpture of mine. He can include sculptures of mine in his own painting, so it's really playful, and it's multiplying the possibilities, like going to the power of 2 to the power of 3.
Yeah. I'm not too familiar with him, but I'll check out some of his work. Yeah, it sounds really interesting.
He just did a very beautiful board for Isle.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah, not long ago, right?
Yeah,
just a few days or weeks ago.
Last month.
Okay, this one is from. Let's see if he says his name.
Hello, Raphaël. I discovered your work when I was working on the skate exhibition at the Tripostal in Lille in 2006. And for this exhibition, you had written a text which was called La question est de savoir qui sera le maître. This text was also published in La Conjonction Interdite a little bit later. And in this text, you talk about Roland Barthes and his analysis in relation to children's game, to exist as a creator rather than just a simple user. In my opinion, to recognize oneself as a creator in every aspect of our life is essential. And as a skateboarder, I see this practice as one of the only ones to cause this in a constant way. Can you tell us a bit more about Barthes' analysis of children's games and how you perceive this notion of skateboarder creator?
The text of Roland Barthes is in a book called Mythology. It's actually a very small text and is a critique of the plastic toys and an apology of wooden toys. And mostly in the article, as far as I remember, I haven't read it for 15 years, like wooden blocks or like assembling toys. That's funny because it really makes a difference between the plastic and the wood, and like probably that was before Lego exists. And what built my mind or my practice is really playing Lego as a kid. And that also builds the way I consider forms. Like I like moving units more than let's say working with clay. Like you have children who are better with pâte à modeler or let's say clay, and I would play with them because it's completely, you can do whatever you want. So and you're creative, but you're also creative in a very different way when you are playing with Scapula or layers or this type of thing. So maybe it's not only like the creativity, and also like he's talking about dolls or he's talking about like the 5 kind of things you buy to little girls so that they will be like good housewives when they will be older.
Yeah.
So it's a critique of these things, like a sociological critique.
Right.
But at the same time, like when you offer a doll to a girl, she can make movies or theater plays with a dog, or she could do that also with the Lego figures or with a Playmobil. I see that with my daughter today.
Yep.
Not because she plays with dolls, because she doesn't like them, but there are many ways to be creative. Skateboarding is one way to be creative, but in a certain way, it's not the only one. Like Jérémy Daclin is doing fishing. Maybe if I was a fisher addict when I was a teenage, I would have built my relationship to the world from this activity of fishing, like the patience that you need to have, the type of movement, the invisible string, the flies that you have to build. So I always say that to the students, like it's not because I am a skateboarder that I would get on well with you if you are a skateboarder. Like if your passion is, I don't know, whatever, like music or reading or a science fiction book or whatever turns you on, really.
Are you okay with doing this very last one?
Okay, let's try
it. It's Gustav Eden. It's an interesting one.
Hey Raphael, and hey Quentin. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to ask a question. Really appreciate it. Right, so I'm interested in, Raphael, your work with how you work with context and setting for your work. It seems to me that the institutionalized art world and skateboarding kind of have opposing directions here, where the art world creates a gallery space in order to create freedom within that space for anything inside the space is art. And in doing so, perhaps also suggests that what's outside of the gallery space is not yet art. Skateboarding is kind of the opposite in a way, that when we create institutional contexts like skate parks or contests, then we take away the freedom and we kind of reduce the expression. So skateboarding constantly rejects categorization and rejects formalization and sort of gives more credence to the free skating that takes place in the streets, or at least in theory. So I'm really interested in how your work, how you use these two kind of worlds and settings to inform your work. And to give an example, I'd love to hear how you would reason or approach an exhibition that was half of the exhibition was in a gallery space inside and half the exhibition was outside in a public space. I mean, in that kind of context, what work would go inside the gallery and what would go outside the gallery? And how would you like the audience to engage with the different work and so on? So I'd love to hear how you would approach that kind of example. All right, thanks a lot and hope to catch you both soon. Take it easy.
It's a very complex question once again. I think some other artists than me are working a lot more than I am on the question of context that is expressed here. I must say that first I feel much more at ease with the museum context, maybe for the reason that Gustav is explaining very thoughtfully. Also because in the museum you're choosing to go there. Like maybe not as a kid with your school, but and the public space, I find it difficult. I haven't done that many artworks in the public space, but basically I find it hard to impose anything on anyone. But yet this is tempting. And sometimes when I do, and I'm not sure if it's a strategy which I will carry on forever, but if I take two projects, the Cycloid ramp and also an ongoing project with a chimney, what I like is the fact that you might not know that you are in front of a sculpture. I like the fact that the form or the materials in themselves are not sufficient enough to characterize the object or the space that you have in front of you as an artwork. Today, and that goes back to the question that Soy was asking about what is art or what is defined as art. It's getting too complicated. For me, the context, but the historical context is what defines. Like there are a lot of buildings that are very sculptural. And if you would ask me, are they like really large sculptures? I would say, well, yeah, why not? The Statue of Liberty is clearly a sculpture, and then you have staircases inside, and so it's also clearly a building. But the reason why any building is not a sculpture is just like because the architects decided to work as architects and not as fine artists. And if they want, because it's just a question of choice, or if they choose to define themselves as sculptors and architects, that's their right. And if they want to try to define a concept of an artwork which is a building and building to be an artwork, why not? But they will have first to define it, and also they will have to convince all the other art historians and art critics, and we will discuss this and to see if it's just like a straightforward idea and something that it's sold on the counter of a bar, and or if it's very thoughtful and if it helps renewing the concept of an artwork. So I would say that's my strategy, to try to blur the boundary. And in the chimney works that I'm doing right now, I've been commissioned to emphasize the ruins of an ancient factory. I decided to work around a truncated brick chimney. And I'm building a second chimney next to it, and one floor of concrete and one tub of concrete, mixing the new, connecting the new chimney that I'm building. And the new chimney, basically it has the height of the older chimney when it was unbroken. So from the distance, you just like put a chimney in a space, and it's going back to 50 years ago when this chimney was in place, and it's the same material. But then you go closer to this chimney, and you realize that it is connected to the other one, and suddenly it might look like some very simple still life, like a painter that I really like, Morandi, who is painting like a couple of bottles and very simple shapes. So that could be this type of sculpture, very simple still life. And then you can enter inside the chimney, the new one, 25 meter high. And inside you see that it's actually ornamented with a spiral of bricks going to the top. And this type of spiral was used in Tudor architectures in England in the 17th or 16th century to ornate chimneys. It is beautiful, it's amazing, I love them. I did replicas of them already in my work, but it's also like a way to show off. Like you build huge chimneys that looks like column, and you do some extremely complicated geometrical patterns on them. So my idea was to take these Tudor chimneys and to return it like a sock. So from the outside, this is just an industrial chimneys, but if you are curious enough to go closer and closer to this new chimney that looks old and that gives like a temporal confusion. Temporal confusion, because there is a chimney where 50 years ago was a chimney, so suddenly it's just like you're back in time, or this type of confusion. So if you are curious enough, you go closer and you get to what is that might be considered artistic because it is ornamented. I'm not sure what is ornamented is actually artistic, but at least what is refined, what is taken care of, or that was long to make and stuff, is inside this chimney, and it's the only way to access this part of the work is to
get
go
closer
inside.
Okay. All right, let's wrap it up here. Thank you, Raphaël.
Thank you.
That's it for my conversation with Raphaël. Follow him on Instagram at Raphaël Zarka and visit his website raphaelzarka.com to check out some of his artworks throughout the years and get your hands on some of his books. Raphaël Zarka is spelled Raphaelzarka. If you haven't seen it already, I highly recommend you check out the Paving Space video by Dan Magee from 2016 that we talked about on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. See you soon for a new episode of Beyond Boards.